Ho, ho, ho! It's time for another day of Headlines with Ron, where I'm going to be adding some context and commentary, see if we can understand what's going on in the world, and let's get right to it. Oh dear. Well, maybe today is not the day for my festive garb to be greeted with this. Another shooting. All those crazy Americans, but no, this time it's in Europe, and this is I think this sort of thing points up the phenomenon of mass shootings. We know in the past, I know in growing up in the United States many years ago, there weren't big shootings every week. Everybody had guns. Kids drove to high school with the gun racks in the back of their pickup trucks. Everybody had those around town. We had show and tell, and kids showed guns in the class. And then suddenly there was I think a social phenomenon that created this situation where young men, I believe it's almost always young men, or sometimes older disgruntled men, go crazy and try to kill a lot of people for some reason. And I even remember, I think at the very end of the Michael Moore anti-gun documentary that he did, at that time when it came out, maybe it was 20 years ago, he mentioned at the end, Canada had the same open gun rules the U.S. did and the same level of gun ownership, something like that. But yet they didn't have the social phenomenon of crazy mass shootings. Now, interestingly enough, since that time, Canada has caught up to the U.S. with a lot of crazy mass shootings. But you see, there is in all of this an element of monkey see, monkey do. And certainly the U.S. needs gun control. I'm always talking about liberty to have abortions, liberty to carry around guns even. But when you have a social phenomenon of young men or men going crazy and shooting people, you could do a lot less damage just with knives. Here is this interesting thing. I guess we're going to be seeing more of this. Some were blocked overseas. I think we got a New Hampshire Republican primary poll, Trump 33, Haley 29. And this is being shown to, we have the idea here that the people in the back room, they would desperately like to replace Trump with someone who is less crazy, less a loose cannon, less someone who causes himself a lot of difficulty by his behavior, the unforced errors, so to speak. So on that side, they're showing that Nikki Haley's coming up in the polls and could possibly win those early primaries to give a choice. And the media will come out and say, you should vote for this person. We know how the media acts in very certain ways. Many of these articles that are promoting one view or another, or one primary candidate or another, just are presented as news these days, not as opinion or analysis. But we will see more of that, where we're going to get lots of hints and maybe lots of direct messages directly to the public that we need to change up Trump to somebody else. Now, we've had that the same way on the Biden side as well. And if they get Trump out and they put Haley in his place as a primary candidate, and she starts to get traction, this move to change out Biden probably will increase. And here we're talking about, they're showing his approval ratings going up slightly. But you see, here we have a sitting president who's presiding over a lot of inflation, and the media is running interference for him, trying to tell people that they're mistaken if they think the economy is bad or they're paying more for food. It's all fine. they're mistaken if they believe that the homelessness is at an all-time high, and that has nothing to do with the executive branch. As long as the president is a Democrat, once he's a Republican, then it's because of the Republicans' economic policies. This is a little cynical, but it is sort of the way it is. And as an informed media consumer, you just sort of become aware of that. It may be a little pronounced now, but it's kind of always been that way. So those are the two aspects now: trying to remove Trump and saying, well, maybe Biden needs to be switched out as well. Here we have Giuliani bankrupt. He had that huge settlement for defaming, blaming these two poor schmuck election ladies who were doing their job in Georgia. And they're making an example of him. And this was all over the claims of the stolen election, which is, at least in the way that Trump and Giuliani and those people have tried to posit it, it's highly dubious. I would say it's an outright lie. And there are other people who would look at the election and say, all of the pre-balloting and all of these big cities where they canvassed and they got everybody's ballots ahead of time because of COVID, it did give an opportunity, really, for both parties to collect more votes beforehand than ever before and turn the election. And you see in a lot of those big city areas, more people voted for Biden than voted for Obama. And I'm talking about black people, and that's because they were able to canvass. COVID helped out in that situation. And, some Republicans call that unfair because that was something different in the election. But see, the Republicans are at fault because in those inner city areas, in those urban areas, to a lot of black folks in those areas, they haven't offered anything of substance. I remember, living in LA and seeing in some cases that there were not even a Republican candidate being put up against the Democratic candidate because it was just assumed that person would win. But the Republicans have to be aware of all the electorate and all the electoral votes in all the states. That's sometime I'll do a show on the electoral system, why it is useful and it is good, because the parties have to pay attention to all of the people and not just some of them. Now that we had that naked video that was shot in Congress, or a sex video or something, now we've got other news popping up of shenanigans there. Who would have thought? Who would have thought there are shenanigans in government, in the highest organs of office? I think I feel like we've passed that unpleasantness of the shooting. The Europeans there are having to wonder how they became like the U.S. The infection of gun violence. Okay, I always loved this. I don't know if you could see this. This says the words all together: Warner Brothers, Paramount, NBC, Universal. And many years, Drudge, when they posted headlines like this, they jam all of these company names together as the story title that it links to, because it shows how bit by bit all of the huge media and tech companies in the United States constantly conglomerate together. The companies, they're publicly traded, so you have to have month-on-month, quarter-on-quarter, year-on-year gains. Eventually, you will outstrip that. The market isn't any bigger. Either you don't have the product for the market, or you've captured the market, or somebody else has the market. So then the smart guys think the only way we can grow our market for the demands of the shareholders, we acquire the market by buying other companies. And this is what happens. Now, I think in this case, though, there was a lot of drunken spending over the streaming wars during COVID, and I think people have seen a lot of the garbage. They say it's peak TV. All it is the same garbage or worse quality, but it's filmed like a movie. And people maybe don't see the necessity to have these services anymore. For myself, I say, if all you young people, if you haven't seen all the Humphrey Bogart movies, if you haven't seen really seminal movies in the culture, like stuff from Francis Ford Coppola, the Godfather movies, Apocalypse Now, if you haven't seen something like William Friedkin's Sorcerer, a great story about manly men doing manly men things that was a failure at the time, but I think now it's very pertinent to our times. There's so much media in the past. If you haven't seen those, if you haven't seen all of the original I Love Lucy, the original 39 episodes of The Honeymooners, I don't know why anybody would want to see all these new glossy, flashy series. They're filled with cliches. Go back to the past and see the stuff that the media of today is trying to ape, is trying to copy. Plenty to catch up on. Watch all the Charlie Chaplin films, all the Buster Keaton films. One of my lights just went out. That must be Chaplin or Keaton were paying attention and listening to us. That's their signal to us. Okay. See, here we have Hollywood's worst year in a generation. We had all the huge bombs, all the big box office bombs, particularly from Disney. Again, people say a lot of complaints about, is it woke or they gender swaps, but I think it's a lot of these films are just filled with cliches, lots and lots of cliches, and people see that. Let's see what else we have here. This again, we're saying inflation is good, is fine. That they've battled it. This is great news for the Biden administration going into next year's election. He doesn't want to be facing a poor economy. The Fed has told everyone that when they're gonna lower the rates next year. They usually don't do that. It's all for the elections to make sure the economy is ticking along and a recession doesn't start. Putin threatens to invade EU countries. It's kind of a rabble-rousing publication, I've noticed. The Express and more rabble-rousing things. A lot of this, you got to look at the context. People being pushed back against the wall. Sometimes these countries, like Russia, like we saw in the past in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, a lot of crazy things are said for local consumption, for local political consumption. Although, Putin has shown he's not a paper tiger. He said he was going to invade Ukraine and he did it. Here's some more on the war in the Middle East. And you see how quickly I just jumped by those monumental war things. And now I just can't resist on clicking on a UFO metallic orb seen by Air Force One. Who knows? These days, with all the AI-generated junk and with all the drones everywhere, who knows what it could be? Maybe it's something from the U.S. government, a countermeasure for drones. Probably nothing. Who knows? But it got me to click where none of those war articles did. What else do we have here? Oh, yes. Well, this is still the big ongoing news that it's going to be going to the Supreme Court. This was the Colorado courts removing Trump from the ballot because he supposedly, and most definitely did, participate in an insurrection situation on January 6th. Again, this is sort of unforced error on his part. Sort of ridiculous to think that that could have happened, that they could have stalled the election certification. So this will go to the Supreme Court, and of course you can't just ask for the Supreme Court to rule on anything. The Supreme Court is only constitutional issues, only issues of constitutional issues. So sometimes the Supreme Court will say, no, we're not going to look at this. And that just means that the ballot or the judgment that was already made stands. And sometimes they will hear the case and have a ruling on it. And of course, any lawyer can't just go to the Supreme Court. You have a special certification. Supreme Court doesn't deal with the crazy legalese, like, how the law is meant to separate people from the law, make people scared of the law because you can't understand it. It's in its own Baroque language. But when you get to the Supreme Court level, everything has to be in plain speech, and it's much more casual in a way. And the justices sitting there can just pipe up and ask questions of the people who are bringing the case. And again, those people who bring cases are special lawyers who have been trained and taught not to use the crazy language that I believe is intended to make us feel separate from the law and make us afraid of it, and thus obey it. So this is all in process. This is people on both sides will want to use this to pry Trump out of the leader position in the primary races that start next month in January. Here's the great thing, interesting, I suppose. In South America, in Argentina, they're taking all of these very strong measures. It's many of the countries in Central America and South America, Africa as well. They have this smaller country disease where you inflate. If you need more money, you just print some more money. And thus, high inflation has often been the bane of countries like this. It'll be interesting to see if this guy can do anything about it. See, just a couple days ago, it said there were articles that saying home prices were cratering, and here we have prices up in all major cities. I think that's a case of you really have to look at your own situation, not the overall situation. Because overall, they say things are terrible, and you're not going to earn as much as your parents, and you never buy a house. Maybe in general, but you have to look at your own specific situation and your own state, and not get anxiety ridden by hearing the broad story of it. I don't know. I just wanted to see this. Click on this. An old banquet hall from Rome. Neat. What else do we have? Calling Trump threat to democracy central to Biden campaign. That's expected. John Schneider saying something funny about the president. Not funny, but making a threat against him. Here's a little bit. Coming dystopia will be a robust public-private partnership. This is about how the media and the tech companies and the government have combined. And I would say it's really since 9/11 particularly, to make sure that really the United States can see and track all the information at once around the world. Sorry, I've already gone past it. And I can add a little bit to this. I mean, I think you understand why they always want your email to be IMAP, not POP3. They always want everything to be online in the cloud by default, because once it's online, the IMAP mail stored there, only using web-based email, all of those things can be scanned and accessed by the government. Actually, it's by my government. We're behind all this. Why do you think there's a move to use all of these rock-solid VPNs? I won't say that I have direct evidence, but I think there's a strong reason to believe that those are not secure, and that my government, as I expect it would be, can see that information going through the VPN, possibly track you. So the more and more they get everyone linked into these systems and doing all of your banking online and the cashless society, the more there will be opportunities for surveillance of by the government. And in a way, that's probably good for security, but it can open up an opportunity for governments to say there's certain things we don't want reported on, we don't want talked about, certain subjects we'd like to be blocked. You know, certainly that we had the case with the Biden administration, you know, during the COVID years, there were some collusion secretly back with Google and YouTube to certain subjects that they wanted to be censored or taken off or not part of the terms of service of these, and that came to court. It was later overturned by the Supreme Court. Can't do that. I'm sure it was overturned on a very specific legal issue, but this is just an example of how when you set up a security apparatus, and even if it seems benign at the time, politicians will always seek ways to use it for their benefit and instead say it's the public's benefit. If you didn't hear, there is a new South Park special that dropped without any warning. I think just yesterday. It's called South Park Not Suitable for Children. I love South Park. It's a living editorial cartoon at its best, and certainly worth it for just cutting-edge satire in a time where a lot of certain types of speech is prescribed suddenly. The old kind of anything goes comedy has been pulled back. Okay, I think leaving on some comedy by South Park is probably a good way to say a Merry Christmas. And it was a special Merry Christmas for me because I was made aware here that my books are on sale in Asia Books locations in Thailand. Here are two of my books, Last Century, and There Are Still Unknown Places. Left, the Last Century is a group of short story memoir, and the one on the right is a novel. It's also on Amazon or Kindle. I'd love it if you'd read it and let me know what you think. I'm going to pick our Art of War card today. Some wisdom from the past from a Chinese guy. And wait a second, what am I doing? Let's turn off the... Okay. Befriend... I can't read that because my hand's in the way. Befriend the far to address the near. Strategy: leverage distant alliances to solve local problems. Basis: distant allies tend not to become local adversaries. So I don't know. You always have to think, how do we apply that to our business life today, our personal life? Maybe this just means... remember, now's the time to send a Christmas card or send a remembrance, a New Year message, renew our associations that we've let lie fallow throughout the year, or which have become degraded by the use of social media where everything's so familiar. Maybe it's time for a heartfelt message to renew that. And having said that, this is my heartfelt message to have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Bye-bye. See you next time.